On a frosty Christmas Eve, just as the world around them sparkled with holiday lights and promise, Nicholas Hamilton walked out of his penthouse door, leaving his pregnant wife Eliza devastated and alone. In a single hour, her world shattered. Little did she know that by morning, her face would be on every news channel across the country. What happened that night would send shockwaves through the media, and their once loving marriage, revealing a labyrinth of hidden secrets, half-truths, and alliances so dark that even Nick, the man at the heart of it all, never imagined they'd see the light of day. Nicholas Hamilton was born into a life most people only dream about. His father, Charles Hamilton III, ran a prestigious financial conglomerate, Hamilton Global Holdings, with connections to old Wall Street families and foreign royalty. His mother, Beatrice Hamilton, came from a line of art collectors in Europe. By the time Nick was 5, he had already visited more countries than the average person would see in a lifetime. Summers were spent at a private villa in Lake Como, winters at a family estate in Switzerland. His friends joked that Hamilton was synonymous with privilege. But with privilege often came the expectation of perfection. Nick was groomed to follow in the Hamilton lineage from a young age, finishing top of his class at Phillips Exeter Academy, then breezing through Harvard with a degree in economics. He was brilliant, daring, and undeniably charismatic. Investors found him charming at 23. Board members found him wise beyond his years at 24. By the time he was 27, Nick had garnered his first Fortune magazine cover for youngest hedge fund prodigy to make $1 billion. He basked in it. He reveled in the accolades in the press and in the power he held over markets. Yet behind the carefully tailored suits and the opulent parties like the annual Hamilton Charity Ball at the Plaza, Nick carried a hollowness he could never quite shake. The constant pressure to outdo himself, to exceed the lofty bar set by his parents, and the relentless scrutiny of the media weighed on him like an anchor. And then came Eliza. Eliza Jordan was the kind of woman no one would ever guess would end up with a billionaire. She hailed from a modest background in upstate New York, her parents running a small diner famous for its apple pie. Eliza grew up working behind the counter, greeting travelers off Interstate 90 and listening to their stories. She developed an open, warm demeanor and an empathetic heart. After college, she dreamed of moving to Manhattan and becoming an investigative journalist. She idolized Christiane Amanpour and Anderson Cooper, determined to make her mark. But big breaks are hard to come by. She spent months pitching stories to local stations, blogging on the side, and occasionally freelancing for small publications. Her first real job in the city, ironically, had nothing to do with journalism. She became a research assistant for a non-profit legal firm investigating corporate malfeasance. One grey November afternoon, she found herself in the middle of a high-profile press conference. A whistleblower was about to expose an executive's dubious dealings, and the press had gathered in droves. It was there that Eliza first crossed paths with Nick Hamilton. He wasn't implicated in the scandal. In fact, his philanthropic foundation was partially funding the non-profit she worked for. He arrived impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying an air of confidence that made every head turn. Eliza, holding a thick binder of legal documents, nearly bumped into him as she rushed to hand over some last-minute notes to her boss. "Careful," Nick said gently as papers flew everywhere. "We wouldn't want to compromise your hard work." She looked up, cheeks flushing. I'm so sorry," Nick knelt, helping her collect the documents. Their eyes locked for only a second, but in that moment, the thrumming chaos of the press conference faded to a dull roar. Nick Hamilton, with all his grandeur, was kneeling on the floor, picking up papers for a woman he'd never met. He smirked. "Looks like you're the only person here more anxious than I am." Eliza laughed, nerves loosening. "This is my first big press event. I'd hate to drop the ball." When Nick handed her the final stack of papers, their fingertips grazed. In that fleeting touch, Eliza felt something shift within her. For Nick, it was as if he'd found something honest in a world too often painted in shades of pretense. Their relationship blossomed faster than either expected. Nick was used to women who were impressed by his money, who saw him as a golden ticket to an elite lifestyle. He'd grown wary of that brand of attention. But Eliza was different. Warm, unpretentious, and passionately curious about the world. She was initially skeptical. Men like Nick often wore masks. But after a few dinners, early morning coffees near her modest apartment in Queens, and a few philanthropic events they attended together, she realized how genuine his empathy was. When Nick talked about philanthropic projects like funding medical clinics in rural Peru, Eliza's eyes lit up. She asked deeper questions about the people his foundation served, the cultures, and the structural problems that led to inequality. Nick found himself confiding in her. He spoke of the pressure his family placed on him, the exhaustion that came from constantly performing, constantly being the perfect Hamilton heir. Eliza listened, never judging, never rushing to offer hollow solutions. She made him feel seen, not as the billionaire mogul, but as a flawed human being who just wanted to find meaning. Slowly, their weekends became getaways from the crowded Manhattan scene to quiet corners of the Adirondacks. Nick taught her to ski. She taught him how to cook basic meals, and they binge-watched documentaries about journalism heroes. Despite coming from different worlds, they fit perfectly, each rounding out the other's vulnerabilities. One spring evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Nick proposed. It wasn't at some grand gala or a glamorous trip to Paris. He did it in her tiny kitchen in Queens Flower, dusting his cufflinks because they'd just attempted to bake a pizza from scratch. Eliza cried tears of joy, whispering yes through her sobs. The wedding was a whirlwind. The Hamilton name demanded a level of pomp and ceremony. The tabloids ate up every detail. Eliza initially wanted a small, simple affair, but Nick's parents insisted on hosting it at the Hamilton family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling manor that had hosted senators, tech moguls, and even European nobility on occasion. A sea of paparazzi camped outside the estate gates, hoping to snap photos of the commoner bride who had captured the heart of the heir. Celebrity friends of the Hamiltons attended, including business magnates like Bill Gates and well-known figures like Oprah Winfrey, who happened to admire the Hamilton Foundation's philanthropic efforts. Even Elon Musk was rumored to have sent a personal note of congratulations, referencing a conversation he'd had with Nick about future humanitarian projects on Mars, half joke, half serious in Musk's typical fashion. Eliza felt swept away by the spectacle. As she walked down the aisle, it was hard not to be overwhelmed by the cameras and the crowd. Still, when she locked eyes with Nick at the altar, everything else fell away. In that moment, it was just them. They kissed amid applause, and the newly christened Mrs. Eliza Hamilton tried not to think about the mountain of expectations that came with her new last name. The first year of marriage was blissful, filled with philanthropic trips and adjusting to a new home, a luxurious but surprisingly cozy penthouse overlooking Central Park. Eliza settled into the role of philanthropic advisor, working with Nick's foundation to evaluate projects and travel to underfunded communities. Yet beneath the veneer of happiness, tension brewed. Nick's father, Charles Hamilton III, had never fully embraced Eliza. Though he was polite, There was an undercurrent of disapproval in every question he asked about her background, her career aspirations, her ability to handle the social demands of being a Hamilton. Beatrice Hamilton was more welcoming, but she too had her reservations, always measuring Eliza against an invisible, impossibly high standard. The tabloids didn't help. They followed Eliza relentlessly, scouring her small-town past for anything unsavory. They spun half-truths into headlines like "Small-Town Girl in Over Her Head" and "Hamilton Bride Ambition" or "Love." Nick tried to shield her, but every magazine cover was another reminder that her every move was being dissected. Despite these pressures, Nick and Eliza tried to keep their relationship strong. They'd have weekly date nights away from prying eyes, sometimes sneaking into a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in the Bronx, other times strolling through Riverside Park, disguised in baseball caps. But as Nick's responsibilities at Hamilton Global Holdings grew, so did the demands on his time. Late-night strategy sessions, flights to Hong Kong, endless phone calls with investors. Eliza found herself alone in a penthouse full of staff. She barely knew her attempts at philanthropic projects, overshadowed by the press's fascination with her personal life. After 2 years of navigating high society philanthropic travels and the unrelenting scrutiny of the media, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Nick early one morning, surprising him with a tiny pair of baby booties she'd bought at a local boutique. Nick's face lit up. He scooped her into his arms, promising to scale back his work to be a present, loving father. For a while, Nick tried to make good on that promise. He turned down some late-night meetings, delegated more tasks to his trusted friend and CFO Joshua Pierce. Eliza, radiant and hopeful, started imagining their future as a family. She even pictured moving to a quieter brownstone in Brooklyn, where a child could grow up with parks and a sense of neighborhood. Then reality intruded. A major deal was brewing at Hamilton Global Holdings, one that involved a merger with a European bank partially owned by a Middle Eastern sovereign fund. It was complicated, volatile, and could catapult the Hamilton empire into a new stratosphere if handled correctly. Charles Hamilton III insisted Nick oversee negotiations personally. Nick's calendar filled once again. Eliza tried to be understanding, but each day she felt more like a bystander than a wife. When she brought up her concerns, Nick would reassure her. "Just a little longer, Eliza. After this, we'll take that long vacation to the Maldives, away from everything." Still, the baby grew inside her, and with it a gnawing uncertainty about their direction. As December arrived, New York transformed into a wonderland of sparkling lights and holiday cheer. The Hamilton family was expected to spend Christmas Eve at the Connecticut estate. Eliza, now nearly 7 months pregnant, wanted nothing more than a cozy celebration with Nick, her parents who planned to drive down from upstate, and maybe a few close friends. But the Hamiltons had a tradition, a lavish Christmas Eve ball that served as a fundraiser for their foundation. Politicians, celebrities, and Fortune 500 CEOs were all on the invite list. Charles and Beatrice pressed for Eliza to attend to show that the future mother of the Hamilton heir supported the family's philanthropic legacy. Nick was torn. On the one hand, he knew Eliza was exhausted physically and emotionally. On the other, the ball was a chance to seal deals and glean more support for the upcoming merger. He assured her it would be less formal than usual, that she could just make a brief appearance, wave hello, and retire early. Eliza reluctantly agreed. She chose a simple emerald gown that accentuated her baby bump, hoping to avoid the flamboyance that usually came with Hamilton events. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. On Christmas Eve, the Hamilton estate bustled with staff in black uniforms, preparing canapes and setting tables with fine china. A string quartet played softly, while guests arrived in limousines and expensive cars. The media lingered beyond the tall iron gates, waiting for glimpses of the glamorous soiree. Eliza arrived with Nick stepping out of their Bentley to the pop of flash photography. Nick placed a protective hand on her back, guiding her inside. The mansion was festooned with glittering Christmas trees, each meticulously decorated in a different holiday theme. Inside the who's who of society mingled CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, foreign dignitaries, and celebrities. Eliza felt the subtle glances at her growing belly, heard the whispered remarks about the next Hamilton generation. She tried to keep her head up, reminding herself it was for a good cause. Nick left her side to speak with a group of European bankers. Eliza found herself adrift, heading to the open terrace for some fresh air. There she found Joshua Pierce, Nick's longtime friend and CFO, sipping a glass of champagne. "Josh," she greeted him. "Nick is working again, I see." He offered a sympathetic smile. "I tried to convince him to dial it down for tonight, but you know how he is, especially with the merger negotiations at such a delicate stage." Eliza's shoulders sagged. "I just wish we could have one night of normalcy." Before Joshua could respond, a hush fell over the terrace. Charles Hamilton III emerged with a small entourage. He beckoned Eliza closer. "We need you and Nick inside for a photo with the board members. It's important for the Hamilton image." Fighting the urge to roll her eyes, Eliza followed. She stood by Nick, plastering on a polite smile, while cameras flashed. Beyond the lenses, she spotted her parents looking overwhelmed and somewhat lost among the crowd. Her heart ached. She wanted to go to them to share a moment of normal Christmas cheer. But in an instant, Nick was pulled away again, this time by a group of donors from Dubai. Eliza was about to follow when a sudden wave of dizziness overtook her. She hadn't eaten much all day, and her pregnancy made her more prone to fatigue. She steadied herself on a nearby chair, blinking away black spots. Just then she heard it, a muffled but heated argument emanating from behind one of the closed doors leading to Charles Hamilton's study. She recognized Nick's voice, tense and furious. Another voice retorted, "Charles Hamilton." Against her better judgment, Eliza moved closer to the door. She heard fragments. "Not your puppet, the legacy bad time. The baby, my decision." Each snippet ratcheted up her alarm. Suddenly the door swung open. Nick stood there, face flushed, eyes wild with anger. His father was behind him, cold rage emanating from his typically composed features. Nick's gaze flicked to Eliza. "We're leaving," he said, voice trembling. He grabbed her hand and stormed through the corridor out of the mansion, ignoring the startled glances of guests. Eliza followed, stumbling in her heels, her pregnant belly making swift movement awkward. Outside, their Bentley driver scrambled to open the door, but Nick waved him off. He pressed a button on his key fob, and the car's engine roared to life. They sped off the estate grounds, Christmas lights receding in the rearview mirror. For several minutes, Nick said nothing, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Eliza finally mustered the courage to ask Nick what happened. He exhaled a shaky breath. I can't keep doing this. My father is pushing me toward decisions that threaten everything I've built. He wants me to sacrifice our personal life for the good of the Hamilton name. It's always about the legacy. Always." Eliza swallowed. "But what does that mean for us?" Nick glanced at her eyes darting from her belly to her face. I don't know anymore. They drove in silence back to the penthouse. Nick barely spoke as they entered their lavish penthouse. Christmas decorations twinkled in the foyer, gold ornaments on a towering tree, wreaths on marble pillars, and the faint scent of cinnamon from scented candles. It felt eerily disconnected from the tension swirling in the air. Eliza tried to confront him gently. Nick, talk to me. He turned abruptly, his eyes filled with a turmoil she had never seen before. I can't. God, Eliza, everything is caving in on me. The merger my father's demands the board. And now the baby. Her heart clenched. What do you mean, and now the baby? We both wanted this child. He raked a hand through his hair. Yes, I did. I do. But everything is crashing down all at once. My father is threatening to revoke my position if I don't follow his plan. The press is hounding us. I can't breathe, Eliza. Tears welled in her eyes. So what, you're going to run away from me? From us? He paced across the marble floor. I need space. I can't think straight. I've never felt so trapped. A wave of pain, not physical, but emotional, coursed through her. She lowered herself onto a sofa, trying not to sob. I'm 7 months pregnant and you're talking about needing space, Nick. We're supposed to be a team. He grabbed his coat and keys. I'm sorry, he whispered, but I can't be here tonight. I just need to clear my head. Panic seized her. Nick, it's Christmas Eve. Nick's expression was torn, but his voice was resolute. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. I need this. And before she could say another word, he walked out of the penthouse. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent rooms. Eliza found herself alone, disbelief turning to shock. She sat there staring at the Christmas tree lights, flickering like distant stars. The baby moved inside her belly, a cruel reminder that she was not alone, but also a reminder that her husband had just left her on Christmas Eve. She tried calling him, no answer. She tried texting, no response. Christmas carols played softly on the home's integrated speaker system, an unwanted soundtrack to her heartbreak. She thought about calling her parents, but she couldn't bear to ruin their night. They were still at the Hamilton estate, likely feeling out of place. She didn't want them driving back in the dark on icy roads, just because of Nick's meltdown. Eliza paced the penthouse stairs, streaking her cheeks, until exhaustion took over in the early hours of the morning. She finally fell into a fitful sleep, the TV in the living room still glowing with late-night talk shows and replays of holiday specials. When Eliza woke around dawn, a sense of dread still clung to her torso. She padded into the living room, searching for any sign of Nick's return. The sofa was empty, the penthouse silent. Feeling restless, she turned on the news. Initially, it was just background noise, holiday segments, weather reports, traffic updates. Then something caught her eye on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Breaking Hamilton family drama. Her stomach tightened. She turned up the volume. The anchor spoke in a grave tone. In an unexpected twist. This Christmas morning, shocking events have unfolded around the Hamilton family empire. Reports indicate that Nicholas Hamilton, heir to Hamilton Global Holdings, has left his pregnant wife, Eliza Hamilton, and is currently unaccounted for. We have unconfirmed details suggesting a possible connection to the highly anticipated European merger. Stay tuned. Eliza's mouth went dry. Her phone began to vibrate with incoming calls and texts. She switched to another channel, the same story, more speculation. A photo of her taken at the Christmas Eve ball filled the screen. The words, "Where is Nicholas Hamilton?" scrawled beneath. Panic consumed her. Why was the media reporting this so quickly? Why were they implicating her in the same breath as the merger? She attempted to call Nick again, straight to voicemail. Within minutes, the doorman of her building called up. "Mrs. Hamilton, we have half a dozen reporters in the lobby. They want a statement. Shall I call security?" Eliza's heart pounded. She felt cornered, confused. She had no idea what was happening or why it was happening so fast. All she knew was that her husband had walked out on Christmas Eve, and now the world seemed to know and wanted answers. She needed help. In a panic, she dialed Joshua Pierce. His line rang 4 times before he answered in a groggy voice. "Eliza, what time is it?" She explained the situation, voice trembling. "The news channels are talking about me, about Nick, and about some scandal with the merger." "Josh." "I'm scared," he cursed under his breath. "I just woke up to a flurry of messages too. Listen, I'll come over. Don't say anything to the press until I get there. Keep your doors locked. If Nick calls, let me know." Within half an hour, Joshua arrived looking as rattled as she felt. He wore a hastily thrown-on sweater and jeans, not his usual immaculate suit. Outside, Eliza could see camera crews gathering on the sidewalk. "I've been trying to reach Nick too," Joshua said, after hugging her gently. "No luck. This rumor about him disappearing and leaving you on Christmas Eve, well, it's half true, I guess. The media's spinning it as a meltdown tied to the merger. They're also claiming you might have threatened to expose some of Hamilton Global's internal dealings." Eliza's eyes widened. "What? That's absurd. I've never done anything like that." Joshua grimaced. "I know, but gossip feeds on confusion. People smell blood in the water. Charles Hamilton must be in damage control mode. They probably want you to keep quiet." She felt a fresh wave of anger and hurt. Nick promised he'd come back. Now he's not answering. And I'm the one under the microscope. "Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this," Joshua said, pulling out his laptop. "We'll try to contact the Hamilton PR team, figure out the real story." Over the next several hours, the media frenzy intensified. Shots of Eliza's face from the night before, a tearful expression as she left the estate, were plastered on news networks and gossip websites. Speculation ran wild. Did Nick leave because he feared fatherhood? Were there financial irregularities about to be exposed? Was Eliza blackmailing the Hamiltons? The speculation about blackmail stung the most. Eliza had never sought money or influence from Nick. She'd always tried to be independent, even after marrying into wealth. As the day wore on, Joshua managed to speak with the Hamilton PR director. He relayed their statement to Eliza. "They're denying all blackmail rumors, but they're also not clarifying why Nick left. They just say he's taking personal time. They want you to do the same, and to avoid contact with the media." Eliza shook her head in disbelief. "How can they leave me hanging like this? I'm the one left alone on Christmas, and they want me to go silent." Joshua patted her shoulder. "I don't like it either. But they're probably scared. This merger is huge, and any sign of instability might kill the deal." She pressed a hand to her baby bump, feeling a reassuring kick. "What about me? What if something happens? This stress can't be good for the baby." His eyes softened. "I know. That's why I'm here. We'll figure out a way to protect you. Maybe you should reach out to your parents. Have them come here." Eliza nodded, tears threatening again. "Yes. I need them right now." Later that afternoon, while Joshua took calls in another room, Eliza scrolled through her phone. She noticed an email with the subject line, "You need to see this." The sender was unknown, a cryptic address. She opened it hesitantly. Attached was a PDF labeled Hamilton Merger Confidential. Her heart raced. She tapped it, revealing pages of financial documents, email transcripts, and legal correspondences. It looked like evidence of wrongdoing internal communications that suggested Hamilton Global Holdings and its potential partners were engaged in questionable practices. Some lines mentioned bribes to foreign officials, others indicated accounts in offshore tax havens. Eliza's mind spun. Was this real? Who sent it, and why send it to her? She scrolled further and found references to Nick's involvement. It seemed he might have discovered these shady dealings and was resisting them. If he refused, his father's entire plan for the merger could collapse. Could this be why Nick had stormed out? Was he being blackmailed by his own father to keep quiet, to finalize the merger? Despite potential illegalities, Eliza felt sick. If this information was legitimate, it explained the swirling rumors. Perhaps Charles Hamilton suspected Eliza would blow the whistle given her background in non-profit legal work and her investigative streak. Just as Eliza was about to show Joshua the documents, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Charles Hamilton III. Anxiety flared in her chest, but she answered. Charles's voice was controlled but cold. "Eliza, I'd advise you not to speak to the press. The situation is delicate. We wouldn't want you to misrepresent the family." Eliza's frustration boiled. "I haven't said a thing. But maybe you can tell me where Nick is." He paused. "Nick is taking time to reconsider his position. That's all you need to know. As for you, I suggest you refrain from meddling in matters that don't concern you." Anger surged. "Excuse me, I'm his wife. This concerns me and I'm carrying his child." Charles's voice took on a menacing edge. "And that is precisely why I'm telling you to tread carefully. The Hamilton name carries weight enough to protect or to destroy." "Good day, Eliza." The line went dead. Eliza's hands shook. She had never liked or trusted Charles, but to hear him threaten her so openly. She knew now the documents in her inbox were the key to everything. She showed the files to Joshua, who read them with horror etched on his face. If these are real, then Hamilton Global is on the brink of committing massive fraud. This would ruin the company if it became public. Eliza was adamant. "We have to find Nick. If he's the one standing against these dealings, he could be in real danger." Joshua dialed Nick's number again. No response. He tried mutual friends, colleagues, but no one had heard from him since the night before. Eliza mulled over her options. She had enough journalistic instinct to know that handing these documents directly to the media would create a firestorm and might endanger Nick if he was somehow caught in the crosshairs. But doing nothing felt like a betrayal of all she believed in. She made a decision. "I'm going to contact an investigative journalist I trust, not to publish yet, but to verify if these documents are genuine." Joshua nodded slowly. "Okay. We'll need to keep a low profile. The Hamilton family's PR machine will be out for blood if they suspect you're behind this leak." Eliza steeled herself, determination replacing her fear. "I won't let them bully me." Not this time. The day wore on. News trucks lined the street below the penthouse, and the media demanded a statement. The speculation grew wilder. Some tabloids claimed Nick fled the country, others that Eliza was working with the FBI. Seeking a semblance of normalcy, Eliza's parents finally arrived, escorted by building security through the back entrance. They embraced her, trying to provide comfort, but the tension was palpable. She made a few calls to her journalist acquaintance Sarah Blake, an old college friend who now worked for a reputable newspaper. Sarah agreed to meet discreetly at a nearby cafe that evening, away from paparazzi. Despite Joshua's reservations, Eliza slipped into a cab bundled in a coat and scarf, evading the cameras by using an underground parking exit. She clutched a folder containing printouts of the leaked documents, her heart pounding at the risk. At the cafe, Sarah greeted her with a tight hug. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Eliza shrugged. "Not really, but there's something bigger happening here. I need your help verifying these files." Sarah's eyes widened as Eliza laid out the documents. She listened intently, scribbling notes. "This is huge, Eliza. If these are authentic, it implicates not just Hamilton Global, but major international players. You realize what kind of storm this could create?" Eliza exhaled. "Yes. That's why I need to be sure. My husband is missing. I believe he walked out because he discovered these unethical deals and his father was forcing his hand." Sarah nodded gravely. "I'll use my contacts to authenticate them. But once you light this fuse, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" Eliza swallowed hard. "I'll do what it takes to protect Nick and to make sure the truth comes out." Back at the penthouse, Sarah's team worked around the clock, verifying codes, cross-checking email headers, contacting industry insiders who might confirm or deny the authenticity of the documents. By the next morning, Sarah sent Eliza a secure message. "These are real. We have multiple confirmations. The scandal could break wide open." That same morning, Eliza received a text from an unknown number. "Nick is safe. If you want to see him, come to 30445 West 57th St. Parking, Level B, at 11 p.m. Alone." Eliza's heart soared with hope. But fear soon crept in. Was this a trap? She read the text to Joshua. He frowned. "That's a secluded parking garage near the old Midtown offices. It could be a setup. But if it really is Nick..." Eliza thought of her baby, her love for Nick, and the vow she made to stand by him. "I'm going. I have to." At 10:45 p.m., Eliza discreetly left the penthouse, ignoring reporters clamoring at the front. She called an Uber, instructing the driver to drop her off a block away from the address. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. She arrived at the dimly lit parking garage. The guard at the booth barely looked up from his phone as she entered on foot. Rows of parked cars stretched into the shadows. A tall figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Eliza recognized him in an instant. Nick. She breathed, tears rushing to her eyes. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. But he was there, alive, real. They rushed into each other's arms. For a moment, neither spoke, just clung to the other in desperate relief. Finally, Nick pulled back. "Eliza, I'm so sorry. I couldn't stay. I discovered things about the merger. Terrible illegal things. My father expects me to go along with it. When I refused, he threatened me. Threatened us." Eliza blinked back tears. I know. I've seen the documents. Nick, you should have told me. He sighed. I didn't want to drag you into this mess, but it looks like it's too late. She held his face in her hands. We're in this together. Whatever your father is planning, whatever Hamilton Global is doing, it can't continue. Nick nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I want to expose them. I want to do the right thing. But I'm afraid of what my father will do to you, to our child. Eliza's voice firmed. We won't hide. I've already reached out to a journalist. The story is being verified. Nick's eyes widened, a flicker of hope mixed with worry. If we go public, it could bring down everything. My family's empire, our fortune. We'll be targets. She squeezed his hand. I don't care about the money. I care about us, and about raising our child without a dark cloud of corruption hanging over our heads. Nick let out a shaky breath, pulling her into another embrace. Then we do it. Together. The wind howled through Manhattan's canyons like a warning, but inside the quiet offices of the Journal, the storm had already broken. Just before noon, the headline dropped Hamilton Global's secret network bribes shell companies and a family divided. The article was front page top fold. Sarah Blake's team had verified every line, every document Eliza had brought to her. Nick had provided further testimony, encrypted emails, files, internal communications that traced a web of corruption tied to Hamilton Global Holdings, foreign officials, and multinational banks. The proof was irrefutable, and the world took notice. Within hours, major news outlets picked up the story. Cable networks broke into regular programming. Stock tickers flashed red as Hamilton Global's valuation plunged by billions. Government agencies announced formal investigations. Social media erupted with hashtags like #HamiltonLeak and #LegacyExposed. In their penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the coverage unfold. The same media that once fawned over them now told a different story, one not of glamour, but of integrity. Nick paced in front of the TV, running a hand through his hair. It's real now, he murmured. No going back. Eliza stood and took his hand, grounding him. That's the point. We don't go back. We go forward. That evening, Anderson Cooper aired a prime-time interview with Nick recorded under tight security. Nick didn't name names, but he confirmed the authenticity of the documents. He described the moral crossroads he had reached, the pressure from his father, the threats, the lies he could no longer abide. His voice shook only once when he said, I couldn't bring a child into this world while carrying that kind of darkness. Public reaction was immediate and powerful. Some called Nick a traitor to his legacy. Others hailed him as a whistleblower who dared to stand against corruption even when it meant turning on his own blood. But in the quiet corners of their home, as Eliza held his hand and rested her other on her belly, none of that mattered. They had chosen truth, and from that choice, a different kind of legacy was being born. The fallout from the exposé was swift and seismic. Overnight, Hamilton Global Holdings transformed from a symbol of financial prestige to a cautionary tale broadcast on every news outlet in America. The company's stock nosedived. Investors scrambled to distance themselves. Regulators opened investigations not only in the US, but across Europe and the Middle East. Nick's name, once synonymous with wealth and power, now floated through headlines alongside words like whistleblower, betrayal, and courage. The media dubbed it the collapse of the Hamilton dynasty. And still through the whirlwind, Eliza and Nick stood firm. They remained at their penthouse, declining interviews and offers for book deals. Eliza focused on her pregnancy, clinging to moments of calm between the waves of public attention. her doctor concerned by the stress-advised rest and limited media exposure. So Nick turned off the television, closed the laptop, and stayed by her side. "I'm not going to lose what matters most," he told her one night, rubbing gentle circles over her swollen belly. "The company's gone. My father's empire is crumbling. But you, and him, you're what I have now." Eliza reached for his hand. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping. You let go of something rotten. That takes strength." Despite the chaos, they were not entirely alone. Joshua Pierce remained a steady presence, helping Nick manage his remaining assets. While much of Nick's fortune was tangled in Hamilton Global stock, now nearly worthless, he still had enough in independent investments to keep them secure. Public sentiment began to shift. Where once there had been whispers of scandal, now there was respect. Eliza's dignity under pressure, Nick's decision to speak out, it resonated with people. They were no longer seen as symbols of elitism, but as humans who had chosen truth over comfort. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, one thing was clear. They had not only survived the storm, they had changed the weather. They had traded privilege for principle, power for purpose. And for the first time in their lives, they could look at themselves and each other with unwavering honesty. The new year dawned not with fireworks, but with subpoenas. Charles Hamilton III, once the towering patriarch of one of America's most respected financial dynasties, now found himself at the center of a high-stakes congressional investigation. The televised hearings transfixed the nation. It was rare to see a man of his stature questioned so publicly, his carefully constructed empire stripped bare under the scrutiny of lawmakers and regulators. In the Hamilton penthouse, Nick and Eliza watched the hearings unfold from their living room couch, their hands intertwined baby supplies, neatly stacked in the corner in preparation for the weeks ahead. Charles sat stiffly before the committee, his signature silk tie knotted with precision, but the calm confidence that once defined him had thinned into tension. Page after page of financial records and email transcripts were laid before him. Bribes, backdoor partnerships, misappropriated funds. With each revelation, the weight of decades of unchecked power bore down on him. For Nick, it was surreal. The man being interrogated was the same father who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to deliver a firm handshake, how to carry the Hamilton name with pride. But that pride had long since been eroded by secrets and manipulation. Eliza sensed his pain and rested her head on his shoulder. "You're not responsible for his choices," she said gently. "You made your own. That's what makes you different." Later that night, Nick's phone buzzed. "Father, the screen," read. He hesitated, then answered. Charles's voice was subdued, laced with weariness. "You've destroyed everything I built," he said, more exhausted than angry. "No," Nick replied quietly. "You destroyed it the moment you decided your legacy mattered more than your integrity." A long silence followed. Then Charles whispered, "Take care of that child. Be better than I was." The line disconnected. Nick stared at the screen, his reflection barely visible in the darkened glass. Eliza moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. And in that quiet moment, the final thread between father and son fell away, not with rage, but with resignation. The old world was gone, and a new one, however uncertain, had begun. Winter still clung to the city, its snow-crusted sidewalks and steel-grey skies, a stark backdrop for what would become the most transformative day of Eliza and Nick's lives. It began quietly just after dawn. Eliza stirred in bed, a dull cramp spreading through her lower back. At first she thought it was nothing, just another ache in the long stretch of late pregnancy. But minutes later the discomfort returned, sharper this time, and closer together. Her breath caught. She placed a hand on her belly, now round and firm. "Not yet," she whispered. "It's too early." Nick, who had been dozing in a nearby armchair after a late-night phone call with a legal team, jolted awake when she called his name. "The baby's coming," she said, voice shaking but steady. Within minutes they were racing through Manhattan in a black SUV, sirens in the distance and headlights slicing through the misty morning. The world outside felt like it was holding its breath. For Nick, every red light felt like an eternity. For Eliza, time blurred as pain and anticipation mingled in waves. They arrived at the hospital just after sunrise. The nurses acted quickly, guiding Eliza through intake as Nick clutched her hand, whispering encouragement between clenched jaws. Labor was swift, too swift. The baby was coming a month early, and there was no time to prepare mentally or emotionally. It was raw and real. Eliza pushed through the fear, her thoughts fixed on the tiny life inside her. And then he arrived. Their son. Small, pink, wailing with strength that belied his early arrival. Nick's hands trembled as he cut the cord. Eliza sobbed quietly, not from pain, but from relief, from joy, from sheer disbelief that after everything, the scandal, the fear, the collapse of everything familiar, they had this. "He's perfect," Nick whispered, holding the baby to his chest. They named him Oliver, a symbol of peace, of hope, of a future rebuilt. In that moment, the cameras, the headlines, the weight of legacy, it all vanished. There was only this tiny child and two people who had fought like hell to give him a better world. And in that sterile hospital room, love reigned quietly, but completely. The months after the exposé were a blur of transition. What once defined Nick and Eliza's lives, boardrooms, fundraisers, headlines now felt like relics of a world they had left behind. The Hamilton name no longer graced the covers of financial magazines as a symbol of power, but it was still present, whispered now in conversations about justice, courage, and corporate accountability. Charles Hamilton III, once untouchable, stepped down from the board of Hamilton Global Holdings. The company entered a grueling period of restructuring overseen by federal investigators and new leadership appointed by court mandate. Several of Charles's closest associates faced indictments, and although he avoided prison time by cooperating and paying substantial fines, his reputation was shattered. Nick, newly divorced from the Hamilton empire, chose not to fight for his stake in the company. "Let them rebuild it without me," he told Eliza. "I want our future built on something real." And so they redirected their energy into something entirely new. With Eliza's background in non-profit legal work and Nick's connections and insight into business, the couple launched an organization focused on ethical entrepreneurship. They called it Clear Path, a foundation committed to promoting transparency, integrity, and accountability in business. Rather than chasing profit, their mission was to elevate the stories of whistleblowers, reform corporate culture, and empower future leaders to do better. Eliza also revived her long-held dream of investigative journalism. Through a podcast titled Inside the Veil, she interviewed corporate insiders, lawyers, and activists about corruption and reform. Her calm, empathetic interviewing style, paired with Nick's honest reflections, quickly built a dedicated audience. Though the Hamilton name no longer held its elite shine, it found something more valuable. Respect from communities that valued truth over titles. Nick and Eliza embraced a quieter life, selling off the opulent trappings of their past. The penthouse felt warmer now, not as a monument to wealth, but as a home where love, laughter, and the cries of baby Oliver echoed off the marble walls. They had weathered the storm, and now, beneath calmer skies, they were building something greater than legacy, something rooted in honesty, compassion, and each other. The first day of spring bathed Manhattan in golden light. After a long, relentless winter, both literal and emotional, Eliza finally felt the warmth return. On their balcony, overlooking the soft green of Central Park, Nick sat cradling their baby son Oliver against his chest. The boy slept peacefully, his tiny breaths syncing with the rhythm of his father's heartbeat. Eliza stepped outside quietly, her bare feet padding across the cool stone. She paused to take in the view. Her husband no longer the glossy heir to a billion-dollar empire, but something much more real, grounded human. She sat beside him, the city stretching before them like a promise. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Blowing it all up. The company. The name." Nick didn't answer right away. He looked down at Oliver, then out toward the skyline he used to own. "I regret the way it happened," he said finally. "The pain it caused. The silence between us when I should have talked to you. But I don't regret doing the right thing. I needed to choose our future over my father's legacy." Eliza nodded, emotion swelling in her throat. "You chose truth over power," she whispered. "And somehow, through all of it, we still found each other." Nick turned to her, his eyes glinting in the morning light. "You gave me a reason to be brave," he said. "You and him." Oliver stirred, letting out a soft sigh. Eliza smiled and leaned into Nick's shoulder, wrapping an arm around both of them. Together they sat in a silence filled with meaning, the kind of silence that comes only after weathering a storm. They had lost nearly everything society once said mattered. But here in the heart of the city, with a baby in their arms and sunlight on their faces, they knew they had gained something far more enduring, an unbreakable bond. And that was everything. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey through betrayal, scandal, and redemption. Nicholas Hamilton's decision to walk away on Christmas Eve set off a chain reaction that not only tore down a corrupted dynasty, but also brought an unwavering love into sharper focus. In the end, courage and truth won out, proof that even in a world where wealth and power often overshadow morality, integrity can light the way. If you found this story compelling and want to be part of our growing community, please like this video, share it with friends who love a good drama, and subscribe for more tales that explore the resilience of the human spirit. Your support keeps the conversation alive and helps us bring you even more thought-provoking stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of real-life drama.